Good morning, viewers. This is inDialog, and I'm Jaya. Her books you will find juxtaposed between Charles Dickens and George Eliot in the local library shelves. She has won several awards, including the 1996 American Book Award for her short story collection, Arranged Marriage. An acclaimed poet, my guest today, is also involved in Maitri, a shelter for South Asian women, besides being a fervent Bal Vihar mom. Chitra Divakaruni. Welcome to inDialog.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Arranged marriage. The subject is, bizarre, sometimes repugnant to some Western sensibilities. But yet in India, it's very commonplace for marriages to happen in this manner. How did you come to explore this subject?
Well, in some ways it was precisely what you were talking about. There were so many questions about arranged marriage, not just among non-Indians, but also among our Indian folks, especially young people growing up. What does it mean? Should they go for it? What are the pros and cons? So in my collection, Arranged Marriage, I wanted to explore this issue from various different angles. And I wanted to talk to people through the characters and their lives, which are each very different. Some people like arranged marriage in the book. Some people have successful arranged marriages. Some people choose not to. And some of the women choose not to get married at all.
You, I presume, did not have an arranged marriage. How did you meet your husband?
I met Murthy, my husband, in Ohio when I was doing my master's. And he comes from the south of India and I come from Bengal. And we met in Ohio. So, I tried to convince my mother that this marriage was arranged in heaven. But it took a while to convince her.
Has he read all your books?
Yes, he's read all my books. In fact, he reads them before they get published. He reads them as soon as I finish writing them. But he's not allowed to critique them. He's only allowed to say things like, wonderful, stupendous, and my favorite one is, you've outdone yourself.
What book are you working on currently?
I'm working on a novel, which is going to come out in a couple of years, I think. But I've just finished a collection of short stories, which is with the publisher now and will come out in April of 2001.
Can you read one of your favorite poems for our viewers?
Sure. I thought I would read for you a poem that was inspired by a painting by Raghubir Singh.
Okay.
Sorry, a photograph by Raghubir Singh. And this is from his book of photographs titled Rajasthan. And the poem itself is titled Two Women Outside a Circus, Pushkar. Faces pressed to the green stakes of the circus fence, two village women crouch low in the cloudy evening with their babies, breathing in the odors of the beasts painted on the canvas above. Great black snakes with ruby eyes, tigers with stars sewn onto their skins. Beyond, a tent translucent with sudden light, bits of exotic sound, gunshots, growls, a woman's raucous laugh. The Nepal circus demands 5 rupees for entry to its neon world of bears that dance and porcupines with arm-long poison quills. But 5 rupees is a sack of bajra from Ramdin's store, a week's dinner for the family. So the women look and look at the lighted sign of the lady acrobat. In a short pink sequined skirt, she walks a tightrope over gaping crocodile jaws, twirling her pink umbrella. Inside the tent, the crowd shrieks as Mr. Pinto, the boy wonder, is hurled from a flaming cannon. The women clutch each other and search the sky for the thunder sound. Ecstatic applause. The band plays a hit from Mera Naam Joker, and the crowd sings along. The women gather their babies and head home to the canvas of their lives, stacks of rotis rolled in smoky kitchens, whine of hungry children, slaps or caresses from husbands with palm wine breaths, perhaps a new green skirt at harvest time. But each woman, tending through burning noon the blinkered bull that circles all day the bajra crushing stones, or wiping in dark the stain of sex sweat from her body, remembers in sparkling tights the woman acrobat riding a one-wheeled cycle so immense her head touches the stars, remembers the animal trainer in her leopard skins holding a blazing hoop through which leap endless smiling lions.
Do you think Raghuveer Singh has read that poem?
Yes, he has, actually. Sometime back I did a review of one of his other books for the Los Angeles Times, and the Los Angeles Times published a number of the poems I'd written on his photographs. And so Raghuveer Singh read that review and read those photos and called me and told me how much he enjoyed them. And that was just a week before he died.
Oh.
But I felt really good that we had made contact and that he had read and enjoyed the poems.
How did you get your first break in terms of publishing?
I think that happened when I was starting to write stories, and I took a class at one of the local community colleges, and the professor in the class, who was a writer himself, liked the works very much, and he said, well, you should get yourself an agent. And I said, well, I don't know any agents, and I've only written 3 stories. I don't think I should be looking for an agent. But he said, no, you should do that. And what he did was send those stories to an agent, and that was Sandy Dykstra, who became my agent, who's a wonderful agent. And from that time on, she kind of took my stories to publishers. She took all my books to the publishers, and she's pretty much taken care of the publishing end of things.
I read about someone who picked a copy of your book at Holland railway station. How many languages have your books been published in?
I think now it's about 12 different languages that they've been translated into. Many of them in Europe, but also in South America, in Israel, in all kinds of countries that I never would have imagined. The books, for example, are big bestsellers in Israel, translated into Hebrew.
The women you write about are such strong characters. The plot revolves around them. They are the ones who move the action forward. Not so the men. Why is that?
I think it was a conscious decision of mine to write the story from the women's viewpoint, partly because for so many centuries men have been writing much more than women have, and their stories are generally from the men's viewpoint, and women are seen as maybe desirable or as prizes or as victims or as the beloved, but they're not the movers of the action. They are not the center of the story, and I really wanted my stories to be that way. So I think in my stories it's not that men are not strong, but the limelight is not on them. The focus, the spotlight is on the woman. And that is how I intended it. It's her thoughts we identify with. It's her thoughts we know.
How would you explain racism to your children?
You know, that is a very difficult question. It's something that I'm sure not just I, but many parents of color in this country are always struggling with. And I haven't come up with a good answer to that situation. The best that I can do is to explain to them that diversity is beautiful, that they should appreciate people who are different from them, people who look different, who come from different races, have different colored skins and, you know, different colored eyes and hair, and that if someone doesn't appreciate them for their difference, that those are the people who are missing out, those are the people who haven't understood what life is about, and hopefully that'll help them. But I think that is a very difficult question, and I certainly haven't found a complete answer to that.
There is a passage in your book, Mistress of Spices, where a pushcart vendor experiences senseless racism. Can you read that passage for our viewers? I think
Sure.
it's page 180.
Yes, this is from The Mistress of Spices. And as you know, The Mistress of Spices, although it's a magical novel, it's set in inner city Oakland, where there are a lot of different cultures rubbing shoulders with each other, and not always happily. And so racism is one of the big themes. How do you deal with the differences between races? And this incident deals with that, so she's thinking about what happens. And this is from the middle of the incident, where the vendor is in the park and he's just getting ready to leave. The young men move deftly, block his way. "What makes you think we want any of this shitty stuff?" one says. The other leans forward. Casually, elegantly even, he tips over a neat stack of paper plates. The Indian reaches automatically to grab them and thinks two thoughts at once. How flat their eyes are, like mud puddles, and I should have started running already. The blunt boot tip catches him in the armpit under his outstretched arm. A hot jolt of pain spurts down his side like molten iron, and through it he hears one of them spit, "Son of a bitch, Indian, should have stayed in your own goddamn country." But the pain's not as bad as he feared, not so bad that he can't pick up the stone and pitch it at the young man who's kicking at the cart until it comes crashing down, and the kebabs and samosas that Veena so carefully rolled and stuffed scatter everywhere in the dirt. He hears the satisfying thwack of contact, sees the young man knocked backward with the force of it, his face almost comical in its surprise. The Indian feels good, even though it hurts to breathe, and a small, jagged thought, ribs, spins up for a moment into the lighted part of his mind. He doesn't know that later a lawyer will show the young man's stone bruise to the judge and say the Indian had started it all. His clients were only protecting themselves. He believes that for a moment he can get away, can maybe run to the bus stop, the small safe halo of the street light, the handful of commuters. Can't they see what's going on? Can't they hear? Waiting. And then the second young man is on him. Even now that the Indian cannot remember much else, head yanked up, knuckles cased in metal smashing down, the memory of pain is clear. Pain like a constant throughout whatever happened next. Kick to the groin, face dragged through gravel. So many kinds of pain, like fire, like stinging needles, like hammers breaking. But not really. Pain which is ultimately only like itself. He thinks he shouted for help, only it came out in the old language. Bachao, bachao. He thinks he saw a red tattoo on a forearm, the same swastik sign that they used to paint on the walls of the village homes for good luck. But surely it couldn't be. A blow to the head so hard that his thoughts splinter into yellow stars. Surely it was only the blood in his eyes, the torn nerves playing tricks on him.
What inspired you to write this novel?
Mistress of Spices?
Yes.
You know, there were so many different things. Well, I'll tell you one of them. Before I wrote this novel, I had my second child, and I almost died during that experience. And so I was in the hospital. I was very sick afterwards, and I had this near-death experience where I felt that I had left the body and that I had gone to some other place, and that I was looking down, and it was a scene almost like you see from an airplane, where you see those fields, and they have boundaries between them. And I realized that those were not fields I was seeing, those were different lives. You know, my different lifetimes I was seeing. And as I watched, the boundaries between them began to shimmer and blur. And I got this sense that we move from lifetime to lifetime, only we're not aware of it. And so I wanted to bring some of that, you know, I wanted to be able to write some of that. So Tilo, in fact, is a character who does live many lives in different worlds, as it were. And she moves from one life and one identity to another one, and even takes on a new name and a new body. But as I was writing it, it seemed to me that that was a metaphor for the immigrant experience as well. Because as we move, let's say, from India to America, it is like moving to a different world. And we do take on, in some ways, a different existence. And in many cases, different names as well.
It's true.
And even how we see ourselves changes. So all of those things came together and helped me write the novel.
Tell us how you came to start Maitri.
Maitri was started in 1991. A group of friends and I, we started it together here in the Bay Area. It's the first helpline for South Asian women on the West Coast, though now there are many others. And we started it because we felt there was a great need in the community among our South Asian women who are often in situations of difficulty and sometimes abuse and sometimes transition, and did not know where to turn for help. Because for a lot of them, having left India, they had also left their extended support system, their families, their sisters, their cousins, their aunts, people they could go to when they had problems. And here, for many women who came here as wives, their husbands might be the only person they knew. And if they were having trouble, then where could they go? And they would not go to the mainstream shelters because that's not in our culture, and they didn't feel comfortable talking to people who were of a different background, who wouldn't understand their culture. And that's why we started Maitri, to be there for those women so they could call us and we could listen to their problems, and then maybe, you know, take them to the agencies or services that could help them. And in the last 10 years, it's grown enormously. And it's become really big, and now we have a transitional home where women who are recovering from a crisis situation can come and live for extended periods while they're putting their lives back together.
In a lot of your books, you reflect these women who who've come from abused homes, go back into that environment again. Is that...
And that's one of the hardest things with working in domestic violence, is that you cannot force a woman either to do what you think is right unless she feels the need to do it. And, you know, you cannot, it's not right that you should try to force her into a decision anyway, which is not hers. She needs to take hold of her own life and make her own decisions. It's because she couldn't do that earlier that she's in a problematic situation at this point. So at a certain point you have to say, these are your options, I will help you with whichever decision you make, but you have to make the decision.
There's talk of some of your books being made into movies. What books?
Right. The Mistress of Spices is supposed to be made into a movie. Gurinder Chadha has optioned that film, and she's written the screenplay, and she's on her way.
What about Sister of My Heart?
And Sister of My Heart, we just got a contract put together. Sister of My Heart is going to become a TV serial in India, in Tamil and Telugu. And that movie will be made by Mani Ratnam and Suhasini Mani Ratnam.
This brings me to another poem that you wrote, Makers of Chili Paste, in your book Black Candle. It seems to reflect shades of the movie Spices, Mirch Masala.
That's right. I really like the work of the parallel cinema, the serious independent films, and often they have inspired my poems. So yes, that one was taken from Mirch Masala, and then I wrote a poem on Bhuvan Shom, and I wrote several other poems, and I wrote a couple of poems on Salam Bombay, which I found very powerful.
What do you do in your spare time?
Well, I don't really have that much spare time, as you can imagine, because I do a lot of volunteering with Maitri as well, and I'm often working with clients. And then my family, I like to spend a lot of time with my family, and I like to read. So in between, I read generally in the bathroom, at the end of the day, I'll shut the door and I'll go into the bathroom, and everybody knows no one should disturb mommy in the bathroom because she's reading. But I like to go on long walks. I'm very fond of nature, so I like to go on long nature walks when I have time.
What about working out?
Yeah, I like to work out as well. It's not that I like to work out, but I work out just about every day because I see the necessity of working out. But that's why nature walks are good, because you're out there in nature and you're working out, and it's more fun than the treadmill. Although I must say, I sometimes get very good ideas when I'm on the treadmill, and I go into this zombie state, and my mind goes into a different dimension.
How would you like history to remember you?
That is a very tough question, and I think in some ways I would feel presumptuous at saying that history should even remember me, but I think, if at all, I don't really care if I'm remembered, but I hope my books will be, and I hope my books will touch lives and make people think about issues and concerns, and make people think about this whole complex human question of how we relate to the world around us. How do we relate? Do we relate at all? Do we relate with fear and a necessity to control, or do we relate with love and a sense of caring? And how can we move from the more negative to the more positive? So I hope people will remember the books. Me, I don't care.
Thank you, Chitra, for a most inspiring interview.
You're very welcome, and I'm very pleased to be with inDialog for this.
Thank you. How would you like history to remember you?